Good morning, and welcome to First Presbyterian Church, Elizabethton. This morning's service is recorded and live stream broadcast on our church's YouTube channel, which can be found at fpcelizabethton.org.
In the name of the God who created us, in the name of the Christ who teaches us, in the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us throughout our lives, welcome home, children of God. Peace be with you. Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church as we gather together as God's people in God's name. It is wonderful to be here this morning. I welcome all of you, whether you are joining us in person or online. Thanks for showing up this morning. If you are here, if you would please take a moment, sign those friendship pads and pass them down. If you're online, would you please sign in on the YouTube chat? We just ask everybody to do that so we can tally up everybody in church and give $1 to a local or international ministry. Today is a first Sunday of the month. Our recipient today is Loaves and Fishes. It's a feeding ministry of Carter County that provides hot meals to folks throughout the county on a regular basis. Showing up you are helping to support that work. We also do that by a casserole brigade on the second Friday of each month. That is this Friday coming up. Julia, how are we doing on casseroles? We have 9. We need about 6 more of those. Oh, okay. We got a replacement mic, so I think we're trying to get levels adjusted a little bit here. If you are available to help to supply a casserole or a couple of casseroles, we still need 6 more this Friday. It can basically be any kind of casserole that's kind of a meal casserole. We've got some recipes you can use. People do lasagnas, things like that. If you have questions, see Julia. You can drop those off at River's Edge, or who's our pickup person this week? We're what? Lydia's our pickup person this week. So you got options. That'll be this Friday. If you have questions, just let Julia know. We're going to a Doughboys game into this month. If you are interested in joining and you haven't already signed up, if you signed up, you got an email from me, you're on the list. If you haven't signed up, there's a QR code in your bulletin or a link. You can get on there and just sign up. Let me know if you want to go. We're going to order tickets for that for everybody. We've got about 23 of us so far. We'll get tickets in a week or two and go to the game together. The ticket price includes general admission of the game and meal voucher. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. No, I couldn't. I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry. Apparently got an Elizabethton fan in here. I can't imagine why at First Presbyterian over Elizabethton. However, we're going to root for the Doughboys. Women's group meets this Tuesday at Snad's house. RSVP to her if you can go. Session meeting at 1 o'clock today downstairs. You got the Zoom link if you need it. Hope you brought lunch or grab a fast food or something. We'll eat together and the meeting will start at 1. Any other announcements? I know Rebecca has got a prayer concern while she's walking up here. Anybody else know of anything? Yeah. Thanks, Karen. I'm going to repeat that just for the online, anybody. Interfaith Hospitality Network as an organization isn't in Tri-Cities anymore, but our peacemaking team's trying to keep up some of the stuff they did, which include semi-regular visits to other spiritual gatherings, religious groups of different faiths and different denominations. The next one of those is going to be next Sunday at the Greek Orthodox Church. For anybody who wants to join, meet there at 10 o'clock, stay for lunch. This is in the e-news. If you don't get the e-news and you're not sure how, you can sign up on the website or let me or Scott know and we'll get you added to the list. But that information is in there as well, and if you are interested in that tradition, join. You can always watch us later. Any other announcements, joys, concerns, anything? Rebecca? Yeah.
Many of you who've been here for a little bit might remember Dallas Moss. Dallas and her husband Ray moved here, I'm going to say close to 20 years ago. Dallas has just been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and she's in the process of the diagnosis. They'll be doing a biopsy. She's going to has an appointment in Vanderbilt, but she covets your prayers, and would appreciate that, and we'll be sure to add her to the prayer list. Thank you.
Any other joys or concerns, anything, announcements? Gregory?
I wanted to add another name to the prayer list. Is Randy Tolley. He would like prayers going for him.
What's that last name, Gregory?
Randy Tolley.
Holly, okay.
Thank you.
Any other prayer concerns, announcements, anything? All right, then we continue in worship this morning as we do every Sunday by celebrating the basic core of the gospel. Yet we do our best. And all people throughout the world and creation without condition and without exception. Because in our unique and beautiful diversity, we are all reflections of God's image in that diversity. including our sexual and gender identities, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, straight, male, female, non-binary, our different religious traditions and experiences, looking for wisdom and insight through science, through different faiths and spiritualities, different racial and ethnic identities, black, brown, white, Asian, indigenous. Wherever we are in life, rich or poor, young or old, able-bodied or disabled, suffering or rejoicing, because God loves all of us and everybody without condition and without exception. So welcome, God's beloved community. We are grateful today for the ancestral Cherokee land that we are gathered on and for the loving waters of the Watauga and Doe River watersheds that nourish us. As we worship together, we commit ourselves to work for truth and reconciliation among all people, to respect each other and creation in everything we say and do. So let's worship. I didn't see Carol Ann, so I asked Jane, but you were already on top of it.
Oh, yeah. If you'll join us in our invitation to worship this morning. Thou shalt have only let me restart that. Thou shalt have one God only, who would be at the expense of two. No graven images may be worshipped, except the currency. Swear not at all, for thy curse thine enemy is none the worse. At church on Sunday to attend will serve to keep the world thy friend. Honor thy parents, that is all, from whom advancement may befall. Thou shalt not kill, but needest not strive officiously to keep alive. Do not adultery commit, advantage rarely comes of it. Thou shalt not steal an empty feet, when 'tis so lucrative to cheat. Bear not false witness, let the lie have time on its own wings to fly. Thou shalt not covet, but tradition approves all forms of competition. If you will please rise if you are able and join us in singing hymn number 37 in your hymnals, Let All Things Now Living.
Let all things now living, a song of thanksgiving to God our Creator, triumphantly raise. O fashion and make us to protected and stain us by guiding us on to the end of our days. God honors o'er us, pure light goes before us, a pillar of fire shining forth in the night, till shadows have vanished, all fear-filled was vanished. From light into light, thy law, God, lay forth. The sun in his orbit obediently shine. The hills and the mountains, the rivers and fountains, depths of the ocean proclaim God divine. We too be voicing our love and rejoicing with all a song let us raise, till all things now living unite on thanksgiving to God in the highest. Hosanna and praise.
Comfortable doing, if you're online, enjoy the slideshow of friendly smiling faces.
Take your seat. He's ignoring me. Yeah. Good morning. It's meditation time, and we're going to use an old favorite today, and I'm counting on my sound friends up in the balcony to make sure it's not too loud, right? Yeah, okay. Soft. Okay, thank you. Many of you are familiar with John Philip Newell. Maybe you've read a book or seen a video or YouTube. David's excited. He knows what I'm playing. And he has written a book. First, it started with a book, Chanting for Peace, and it was included with meditations and chants, and there were nobody singing in the book. But, so then he joined a Sufi friend of his and a Jewish friend of his, and they wove these chants together on a CD, one of those antique things. And so Scott's had a hard time playing it today, but we think we've got that figured out. But this comes from the Quran, and in the Quran, it's divided into sections called surahs. And there may be a surah with 1 or 2 verses, or 3 or 4, or even longer. But this surah is about a group of travelers who got confused at time for the evening prayer, and they were arguing amongst themselves which way was east. So, that sounds familiar, huh? So, Muhammad admonishes them and says, "Don't you know, whichever way you turn, there is the face of God." So that's the majority of the chant we'll hear. You're welcome to hum or sing softly or belt it out. But the other words that you'll hear are in Arabic, and it is Ya Basir. And Basir is one of the 99 holy names of God that are found in the Quran and references God's ability to see us completely and wholly. So you'll hear, if you listen carefully, you'll hear Ya Basir. Okay, guys, we're ready.
the face of whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, there is the face of God. Whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, there is the face of God. Whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, whichever way you turn, there is the face of God.
Our reading today comes from Exodus chapter 20. Then God spoke all these words to Moses. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me.
Thank you all for that. That's one of my favorite hymns. I was singing along with you over here. Hope not out of tune for you, though. Yes, I know it was out of tune, Roddy. I hope not loud enough they could hear. But thanks for pointing that out, by the way. Yeah. And Rebecca, thank you for that meditation. I love that John Philip Newell piece. Megan, thanks for reading, especially pinch hitting this morning. So thanks. Real quick, that poem that we opened with, I found that a couple of years ago, and I'm always like just keeping an eye out for poetry that I think might come in handy some morning, because I like doing the invitation to worship as different poetry. And I found that one a couple of years ago and kind of filed it away, and I'm so glad I found it this morning. The author of that, Arthur Hugh Clough, was an early 19th century British poet, more famous probably as an assistant to Florence Nightingale. His writings, I learned, were profoundly influential on Isaac Asimov when he wrote the Laws of Robotics. But this last decalogue that he penned, he wrote, in his words, to satirize the hypocrisy, materialism, and selective ethics and self-interest that he saw in people around him, which keep that in mind as we talk about what we're going to talk about this morning. So maybe you can already guess where this is going. Starting in January, under new state law signed by Governor Jeff Landry a couple weeks ago, every public classroom in the state of Louisiana, from elementary schools up through colleges, is going to be required to display the Ten Commandments on a large poster in a legible font on the wall of every classroom. About a week later, Oklahoma decided to try and one-up Louisiana and require not only that the Ten Commandments be on the walls, but that the Bible be taught in schools as well. What seems to be kind of one of those, hey, hold my beer kind of one-upsmanship to see who can violate the Establishment Clause of the Constitution the best. Texas, Utah, and Florida have all proposed similar bills. And I'd written this sermon earlier this week on Monday, I think, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we did a little family vacation to Charlottesville, Virginia, and I toured Monticello for the first time. So now I'm really kind of fired up about all this. So after kind of learning about Thomas Jefferson and the Bill of Rights and everything. Anyway, the fervor to display the Ten Commandments isn't new. We've been hearing about this for years. But it seems to be gaining momentum right now in conservative states, so I'm going to be surprised if Tennessee doesn't already have something in the works. And since Louisiana's law passed, I've seen a whole bunch of people on Facebook quoting a line from Arthur Kurt Vonnegut's memoirs about life under George W. Bush's presidency in America. You may have seen this, but it's a great line anyway. He says, "For some reason, the most vocal Christians among us never mention the Beatitudes, but often with tears in their eyes, they demand that the Ten Commandments be posted in public buildings." Of course, that's Moses, not Jesus. I haven't heard of one of them demand that the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, be posted anywhere. Blessed are the merciful in a courtroom. Blessed are the peacemakers in the Pentagon. Give me a break. That's from a man without a country. He wrote that in 2005. And I guess I shouldn't be so baffled about the obsession with them. As our country increasingly fractures into opposing sides, the Ten Commandments play into a narrative, I think, of how we think about our national identity, our religious heritage, our cultural values. And since we're probably going to be required by Tennessee law soon to post a copy of them in here in the sanctuary anyway, I figure we might as well go ahead and talk about them a little bit, get reacquainted with them. Governor Landry argued that one of the reasons that the Ten Commandments should be in classrooms is because they are the basis of the rule of law in Western civilization. But they aren't exactly original in that respect. What we get in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, they appear again in Deuteronomy, they seem to be based on the Code of Hammurabi that was about 500 years before Moses and Mount Sinai, around the year 1800 BCE. But even those Babylonian laws in the Code of Hammurabi were likely based on something called the Code of Ur-Nammu from Mesopotamia around 2100 BCE. So they're not original. Nor are those 10 the only laws that are given to Moses. They're a subset. They're also not the first commandments. Let me back up. The Torah counts 613 laws. These 10 are 10 of those 613, but they're not the only 10. They're also not the first 10, or the first one at least. The honor of the first commandment belongs to out in the desert at Sinai when the Israelites are hungry and they ask God to feed them, and God gives them manna, and along with the manna gives them the first commandment: not to hoard food, to take only what you need for the day so that everyone has enough to eat. That's the first commandment God gives. So they're not original, they're not the only 10, they're not the first commandment. Jesus is asked, what are the most important commandments? He names 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are the 2 most important according to Jesus. So these 10 are not original. They're not the only ones. They're not the first ones. And according to Jesus, are not the most important ones. So why do they keep showing up? I think our Constitution is clear about the state not imposing religion on students in public schools. But if we're going to have conversations about the 10 Commandments, as we seem to be having in our political rhetoric now, if we're going to start sticking them on walls of schools in every public education setting for every student seeking to learn, no matter if that student is Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, or atheist, let's at least be honest about what they are. Let's be honest about who they were written for and what they are saying. So I want to start that conversation by offering a little bit of context. We know what they're not. Let's talk about what they are. Because as with anything in the Bible, context matters. This is not just amorphous words kind of handed down out from heaven out of us. These were written over a period of 600 to 700 years in a different culture, and they have a context to them. You all know how important context can be. Suppose I'm talking to somebody on the way out of church and I mention a movie and say something like it was a fantastic movie, as long as you weren't looking for plot or character development. You could take part of what I said out of context and quote me as having said it was a fantastic movie. That doesn't at all mean what I said it to mean, right? Context matters. The context of these 10 Commandments is that they are given to a particular group of people in a particular setting. The group of people are the Israelites, and the setting is they have just left behind several generations of enforced enslavement under Pharaoh in the land of Egypt. And so as they are freed from that and make their way out into the desert on their way to Palestine, God gives them these commandments to help set kind of the expectations and the guidelines for how they are going to function together as a new community. It's really important to note in doing this what they are leaving behind. They're leaving behind a context in which they were enslaved for the benefit of a powerful and wealthy ruling class, and they're going out to form a new identity, and so God gives instructions for how they're to live together. And so the first thing to note about them is these laws are covenantal. They're between two parties. In this case, the Israelites and God. God is creating a covenant with the Israelites around a different set of values than those of the Pharaoh in Egypt. And so specifically, these are commandments about taking away the power of Pharaoh's narrative, taking away the power of that empire and exposing it for what it really is, a tool of wealth and domination to promote that empire's own selfish ambitions. And by the way, when we read the Bible, I know I use this kind of shorthand a lot and talk about empire. When I say that, I'm not talking just about Egypt or Babylon or the Ottomans or a particular empire. I really like the definition by a theologian, used to teach at Vanderbilt, he's now moved on, but Jörg Rieger. He defines empire in this sense as the massive concentrations of power that permeate every aspect of life and that are beyond control by any one actor or person alone. So empire seeks to expand its control as far as possible, not just geographically, politically, and economically. We recognize that. But also intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, culturally, and religiously. And so when we read the Bible and we talk about how some writings in the Bible speak out against empire, we're talking about it in that kind of context. A power that seeks to control every aspect. So what the Israelites experienced under Pharaoh was the power of empire. And that empire sought to control every aspect of their lives, enslaving them to work in service of a political and economic machine that steamrolled people to amass power and wealth. And so this law is given as a gift for those who escaped that empire. And the laws are about revealing the contradictions between life under Pharaoh and how God invites the Israelites to live. They were given as a means of liberation, not to be used as a cudgel to force other people into conformity with the very kind of power of the state they were meant to oppose. A state posting the Ten Commandments in school classes is, by that definition, seeking to extend its control spiritually, culturally, and religiously. It is functioning as empire, the very thing the Ten Commandments are meant to stand against. We can look at a little more detail at some of the commandments, and we may do that over the next few weeks, because I think all of them can be looked at in their own right as different ways of doing that. But we did hear the first one Megan read for us this morning. You shall have no other gods before Yahweh, before God. And I was talking to somebody, I don't even remember who at church, about those recently, and they mentioned how jealous that made God sound. Don't ever put anybody before me, I am the most important. And it does kind of come across like that, and I get it. But I think it's worth considering as well how we think about God. If we are approaching it from this perspective and thinking about putting God first. In the case of Louisiana and Oklahoma and other states, I would suggest that what we are putting first is not God, but a particular narrow religious and cultural understanding. And to me, God is much bigger, much greater than that. Anytime we're telling other people what they have to think or believe, we are not doing that in service of God, but in service of our own ideological passions and commitments. We are co-opting this amazing God of the universe and of all creation to reduce God to a patron of our nation or our war or our church or our morality. So if we're going to start putting up the Ten Commandments everywhere, let's at least be honest about what they mean. Let's start by not putting political ambitions ahead of God, and instead start with inviting those of us who choose to live by them to actually do so, letting them shape our lives with compassion and love. Blessed be. Amen. I invite us to stand and we'll join together in singing our doxology. If you have an offering you'd like to bring forward, you can do that now, or we'll come up for communion again in a minute. You can bring it up then. Let's sing. I'm gonna come sing in your ear on key, Ronnie.
His goodness shines on me and to the sun. His grace has pardoned me and to the Spirit. His love has set me free as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be. Amen. Without end. Without end, amen. Without end. Without end, amen. Without end. Without end, amen. As it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be. Amen.
We talked about that, the 10 are not the first. The first commandment was given, as we said, in the desert. Israelites are hungry. They ask God to feed them. God sends down manna, a word that in Hebrew just means what is it? The strange stuff. But it is enough to feed them. It's enough to feed everybody who's gathered. But only if people don't hoard. Only if everybody takes only what they need, and then there's enough for everybody to eat. And that is the very first commandment that God gives to God's people when they leave Egypt and head to the Promised Land. And so when Jesus then continually, throughout his ministry, breaks bread with people, not just at the Last Supper, but on a mountainside when he's teaching, after his resurrection, he's breaking bread with people, all of that calls back to that very first story of God sharing bread and intending for there to be enough for everybody. So my hope for us is that when we share this meal, it reinforces that ethic for us, an ethic of looking out for one another, of coming to the table together on equal footing as community and making sure that everybody has enough to eat. It was such a critical part of the early church's practice of communion. It was more like it wasn't, I've talked about this before, it wasn't a piece of bread and dipping in a juice cup or anything like that. It was like a covered dish meal. But what they would do is everybody would get to eat, and then the deacons would gather up the leftovers and take them out to feed the widows and the orphans, the people who were hungry, because they wanted to continue to embody that ethic that if we don't hoard and we share, everyone can eat. That's the first commandment. Let that be a commandment that shapes our lives and our economics and our ethics of how we interact with one another, how we look at each other as equally worthy and strive to share so that all can have enough. Jesus did just that with his disciples when he took bread and blessed it and broke it and shared it. Let's do the same. Paul, wine in the glass. Huh? Oh, wine is in the blue, juice in the glass. So as we do whenever we celebrate, I'll invite you. Let me invite the elders who are helping serve come forward, please. We'll let the choir come get in line first and eat because they're going to sing for us, and then everybody else just kind of falls in line behind. Take some bread, dip it in the juice or the wine as you like. If you have any concerns about germs or whatever, there's some little handy self-serve cups. So come and eat. Let's see. Yep. There's Bobby. Sending Him is one of my favorites to always sing on the July 4th weekend. It's 3:40. This is my song.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for land afar and mine. This is my home, my country, where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dream, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. The country skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams no clover, leaf, and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. So hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. This is my prayer, O Lord of all earth's kingdom. Thy kingdom come, on earth thy will be done. Let Christ be lifted up till all shall serve him, and earth may forth to live as one. So hear my prayer, O God of all the nations. Myself I give thee, let thy will be done.
Invite us to circle up and offer a parting blessing to one another as we get ready to go forth from here. And just to call to mind what it is, if we're letting these commandments of God shape our lives, the first one is to look on all people equally, not to impose our own ideologies on other people, but to seek to live as though all people have value and worth, and we work to share and create a community together.